Welcome back to HiCode tutorial. In this video, I'm gonna introduce to you the time variable widgets in HiCode. We'll still have three parts: overview, basic usage, properties, and actions. I will also include a simple application of time variable widgets. Now let's start with the overview. A time variable widget corresponds to a date object in JavaScript. It stores date and time, which can convert to many formats. The values could be in date and time format or in Unix time. And Unix time means the number of seconds that have elapsed since January 1st, 1970. And leap seconds are excluded. We use time variable widgets to make records of time, and you can convert them to different formats depending on how you want to use them. And we can use time variable widgets to get current time, and we use them to get the day of the week for a specified date. There are also other ways to use a time variable widget, and still it is easier to understand inside the HiCode editor. Let's select Absolute Positioning Environment for today. Absolute Positioning Environment comes in handy when we need a simple user interface. We still need a page first, and the time widget we need today is this clock-like widget. The one and only session in its property panel it has is its value, and it is by default the current time. And since it has a default value, let's go to the page and add a button to take a look at the default value. What does it look like? Log it to the console. We will need Inspect and Console. Hit this button and it shows us this number, and this is the number of seconds accumulated from zero time, which is January 1st, 1970. And the second line shows this time, this data time using China Standard Time. So this is the time depending on the time zone of your browser. When I hit this button again, and you can see there is a slight difference between these two numbers, so the default value, current time of a time widget, is always moving forward. In other words, if you don't set a value for a time widget, it will use its default value and will be constantly changing. So what should we do if we want to display a certain date and time? We can go back to the time widget and click this blank area. It will allow us to choose a certain time from this calendar, and also we can select time. I can set the value to now by a click, and now when I preview again, it will show the time that I've set, and whenever I click it, it will not change with the passing time. I can also select to another time or another date. So as you can see, it is pretty simple to set the value for a time widget. And next, let's take a look at its actions. Add a button to call the actions of time widget. And this one will be the log button. And this one we will start with set value. Okay. In this drop-down list, we have three set values to choose from, and they are different in that they receive different inputs. We'll start with this milliseconds. With this set value option, you set the time using Unix time in milliseconds. In other words, the milliseconds accumulated since January 1st, 1970 to the target time. set it back to default value, so it will give us a Unix time format number in the console. So I'd like to correct a former mistake, that this is not the second that accumulated from the 0 time, but the milliseconds. So it has additional 3 digits. I can copy this and put it inside this input box. And I can change it a little bit. And add a console log. Go to preview. So I first log the current time, which is 10:37, and set its value. It is set back to this 35 because I've cleared the last 5 digits. So what is important when using this method of set value is to make sure the Unix time you have is in milliseconds. So if you have it in seconds, you will go back to 1970. Apart from this, we can set the value in 2 more ways that is more straightforward. This one is the simplest one. We'll only need to set the numbers into the corresponding places. Month, day, hour, minute, second. And it will set the value for us. And for this set value, it expects inputs in standard time format, which means 4 digits for year and dash, 2 digits for month and 2 for day. And for time, we will separate the hour, minute, second using these columns. And also it is expecting strings, as you can see the quotation marks. Let's try, for example, dash July dash 25th, and this one will just go with the start point of the day. And there we have it. So after we've known how to set a value for a time widget, let's go on to see how to use it for other widgets. For example, let's add a text box for the date and time display. And we'll just use this set value button. Select this text and set its value and select the time widget. And after I selected it, it offers us a whole list of options. This is a very powerful and convenient widget. It relieves us of the burden of calculation. So I can choose this current value, current time, and then it offers us another list of year, month, date, the day of week in numbers. This one is in text, and the Unix time in seconds and milliseconds, and it also can tell us how many days are there in this month. Let's just go with this ordinary date and time display. Set the value to the text, and it is the current time. When I set it again, it is changed. Also, as we've seen just now, it can display the time of next week for us. Let's add another text, and I will use this to display the time for next week. Still use this same time widget and +1 week, also in the same format. This text should be longer. So we have today, July 29th, and the next week, 5th of August. And those are the foundations of A-type widgets. Let's move on to the examples. So the first application today is to calculate how many days are there between two dates. Let's first get rid of this one. Leave this one only. So let's start to add some elements to this page. First, we will need a text box, and this one will be the starting date. And make a copy of it. Move it down with my keyboard. This one will be the end. This will later be in the format of like this. So make a copy of this too. Move them down. So this one is the end. And then we will need a button to start the calculation. And still another text box for the calculation result. And inside there, it will be end days, for example, between them. And then we'll need to select these two dates. And actually we have a built-in selector. Go to Widgets, Selector, and let's go with this scrollable calendar. Draw it here. And this is a scrollable calendar that you can select from it. And I'd like to hide this by default and only display it when either one of the two text boxes is clicked. So go to this one, add an event. When it is clicked, select this one as the target and show it. I can copy this action for the ending text box. And go to this calendar widget. So when a date value is picked, I will set the starting date to drop-down list selected value. And actually I will need two calendars because I have two dates. Copy this one. I can change its name. Okay, this one is the second calendar. So the ending date should call this one. And change this one's the calendar 2's event to the ending date. Also, the calendars should hide themselves when the date is selected. I can also use card object here. And let's go to see the effects. I'm going back to hide them. So now when I click this, it shows the calendar. I can select the starting date to July 15th, and it is successfully set for this one. And now my task is to complete the logic for this part. After I selected a date from this calendar, I'm going to store the selected date in a time variable widget. So I'm going to create another one for the ending time. So this is the start time. and this is the end. Go to the calendars event. This is the calendar 2, which is for the ending point. So set its value. I've chosen this year, month, day plus hour, minute, second. So this one will be the selected value. But how about the time? Because we're only calculating how many days are there between two dates, so we do not need a precision in seconds. I can use simply the 0, 0, and 0 for this input. And the same goes for the start date. The next thing is to complete the event for this button. So when we clicked calculate, we're going to get the time difference, the date difference between the two selected dates, and give the result to this text box. So how do we calculate the date difference? The standard way to do so is to take the difference of their Unix time. So I first select the ending point, its current value, and the Unix time in milliseconds. And then I will minus the starting point's current value, Unix time in milliseconds. Now we've got the difference, but how do we change this into days? We have 60 seconds in the minute, and that is 60,000 milliseconds times 60 minutes per hour, and then time 24 hours per day. And that is the number of milliseconds we have in a day. Copy it and take it back to this session. Open the formula editor. We'll need parentheses for this, and divide it by this number. And at this step, we may not always get an integer, so should we round the result up to the nearest integer, or should we round it down? For example, when we have a result of 0.9 days, that means the two selected dates are actually on the same day. Therefore, we should round this result down. And to round it down, we will need math.floor and parentheses. And now we finally get the date difference. They are now on the same date, so the result would be 0. And if I give it 28th to the last day, and the date difference is 3, we can try add 2 more days. Also, we can go back to finish the details to attach a string to this calculation result. So I will need plus sign and quotation marks, space, days in between them. But there's still another problem. What if the result is only 1 day, and I will need a singular form? Actually, I'd like to leave this problem to you, but I would suggest storing this calculation result in a variable widget, and then to use a ternary operator to evaluate the situation. Let's go on to see another example. In this application, we're going to select a date, which is the starting point, and enter an integer, say n. Click Go and it will return n days after the selected date. I've skipped the procedure of making this page layout because it's pretty simple, but one thing important is to change the type of this input box to integer because we are going to receive the number of days. First, I will need a calendar for the date selector. I go back to page 1 and copy one from page 1. Paste it on page 2. I will need to modify this event a bit. First, add another time widget on page 2. And this will be the date. This calendar will set the value of this text box. Also, it will set the value of the time widget named date. Then it will hide itself. And I will add an event to this text box to show this calendar. And go on to the logic of this button. When it is clicked, I'm going to do the calculation. It is going to display the result using this text box, so I will set its value. So how do we do the calculation of adding n days to a certain date? Still, choose this widget, and this is what we are looking for, plus n days. And we'd like it to display in the format of year, month, and day, so select this. It is now waiting me to complete this formula with the nth value. So where can I get this nth value? From the input box. So select the input box and its value. Let's go to preview. So select a date, and let's get 2 days after this date. It returns the correct value. We can even try another year. It still gives the correct answer. That is all for today's video on time variable widget, and if you're interested, you can also go to the demo center and look for calendars. They will show you how to build a calendar from scratch by yourself using time variable widget. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.